Hello, and welcome to the How I Tested That podcast. I'm your host, David J. Bland. I'm an author and advisor, and I'm fascinated with testing early-stage ideas. I've helped companies all around the world, and in this podcast, I connect with entrepreneurs and innovators who had the courage to test their ideas with real people in the market, with sometimes surprising results. Please join us as we explore the ups and downs of experimentation together. In this episode, we interview Cathy Nesbitt. She's the founder of Cathy's Crawly Composters, a worm composting business focused on sustainability. Cathy shares her journey into the world of worms, detailing how her business was born when the local landfill was shut down and the city began exporting all of their waste. We discuss the challenges she faced in testing her business and how she eventually pivoted her approach to education through workshops in schools. As Cathy reflects on her experiences, she emphasizes the importance of awareness and driving action and the impact her work has had on the community. Enjoy. Welcome to the podcast, Cathy.
Thank you so much, David. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. I think your background in worm composting and just worms in general fascinated me. I think maybe out of personal curiosity, because I think it was about 10 years ago, my wife had tried some kind of worm composting thing, and we found it was really difficult. It seemed like a straightforward process, but we had a really hard time with it. And then we started talking, and I realized, you're an expert in this, and I'm sure you had your ups and downs in your journey, and I would love for you to share some of that today. But maybe we could just start a bit about yourself for our listeners.
Yeah, so I'm located in Canada, just north of Toronto, and in 2002, our landfill closed, and we started to export our garbage to the U.S. That's kind of how my business was born, not because, you don't know, you just met me. I'm an avid gardener and composter. And so I wasn't even an entrepreneur before doing what I'm doing. I just saw a problem. Our landfill closed and we're exporting like food waste, which is a resource. We call it garbage, but it isn't. It's whatever we call it. And if we call it garbage, it is. So what I'm talking about is indoor composting with worms. 6 million people in the Greater Toronto Area, half live in condos, townhouses, places without space to do outdoor composting, which has its own challenges in urban settings, raccoons or rodents, things you don't want to attract out there. Temperature. So there's all kinds of things. This is done inside, so everybody can do this. And I love how you started, because when we do something new, it's new. So sometimes there is a learning curve. And a lot of people fail their first time at vermicomposting, me included.
So it sounds like it was born out of a personal problem of, look, I don't want to send my quote unquote garbage across international borders. And then also it's like, I imagine other people were also suffering from this. So most of the time we have people on the podcast, they talk about, this is a personal problem for me, but then there were other people also experiencing this, and there were enough of them that would also be on board with the solution that you were creating. But I would love to know a little bit about sort of what you started on, which is, how did those first tests go? What led you to using worms? Anything that you could give us insights about there?
Oh, it was all trial and error. I tested everything without knowing what I was doing. As an accidental entrepreneur, I kind of fell into this because I saw a problem and I had a solution. And then I got into it at work. I was a social worker, and I came home. There was an ad in the paper. Do you have, what was it? Are you a woman? Do you have a business idea? It was a course to write a 6-month course to write a business plan. So I just kind of launched into it and thought, gosh, this is so important. Everybody needs this. Everybody eats. Everybody creates food waste. And again, if we call it garbage, it is. If we call it a resource, it is, which it is. It's food for something else. And so I took that course, started my business, and thought everybody needed what I had. But people don't buy what they need. They buy what they want. And they didn't want what I was flogging. So, I would have a table at trade shows or wherever I could have a table, I would have a table educating people. And I'm high energy, I'm animated, so it's probably fun to watch me when you're walking around at those boring information things. It's like, what's this? Yay, who's this woman? Like one of those flagging, waving balloons. And then I would say, this is indoor composting with worms. I would explain the whole process, and, it's probably fascinating again to watch. And then it's like, what do I do in the winter with the worms? It's like, no, it's indoor year round. Because if you're in a hot place, it's too hot. If you're in a cold place, too cold, the worms like temperature, like even temperature, room temperature. Okay. So people kept saying, ooh, worms in the house. And I was like, how am I going to do this? I didn't know how business worked. And I just had a solution. So I was just like, I would kind of vomit all over people. That's how I tested it. I'd be like, oh, la, la, la. I was thinking, if you don't know, you're not doing. So I'll let everyone know. And then they can say no. Once they know.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think maybe like a coincidence, I guess, or a sign that you saw that ad. I think for the folks that I've worked with early stage to try to write a business plan, I find it a very challenging experience because you're trying to project out what this is going to look like, and you really have no idea. And the people asking for this probably have no idea either. But I think what they're looking for, my hunch here, is the thought process behind it, and not so much the actual numbers you put in, or at least that's what I hope is the experience. But what was that like for you trying to write, I'm going to predict out what my business is going to look like when you're just getting started?
As far as the sales forecasting, like the financials, that part was really challenging. The rest, writing like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Like writing the plan was fairly easy. Remember, it was 6 months. So they would have experts come in, business entrepreneurs would come in and talk about marketing or talk about bookkeeping or all those things. And then we did financials. That part was a challenge. It's like, like you said, how do we know what we're going to sell? Who are we going to sell to? All those things. But that was helpful, having the course, definitely 6 months, and having the peers in the program, which then you're kind of a mastermind networking group moving forward. You might get connected to a few people. It was really trial and error, but because we had to present our business plan and we had little masterminding, brainstorming groups within that course, it was very helpful. And having the entrepreneurs come in and talk about mindset, like if you're a solopreneur working from home, some days are hard. You get stuck. You got that proposal. You got that thing you got to write, but you can't, you're blocked. Someone suggested that in that course, like get out of your house, go for a walk, change the scenery. And that's what I do, because you're trying to force it and you're blocked. You got to go free it up.
Yeah, I definitely have experienced that blocked feeling. So it's interesting about your trade show experience, because I have to say I've been on the other side of that sometimes. And my trade show experience may be a little different from the normal sort of attendee, because I'm going around and literally like asking like, hey, what's your riskiest assumption? And what are you all testing? And they're sort of like, what are you asking me this for? But I'm sort of coaching up people as I go to their booths. And I do remember, there are certain booths. I went to one in rural, sort of the Midwest, and their whole thing was crickets, and they're like, hey, do you want a cricket burger? And I was like, no, I'm good. And they're like, sure. And they're like, we can give you this packet of crickets. I was like, no, my carry-on's completely full, So I just imagine you have, similar types of feedback where people don't, some people tell you no, but other people are like, oh no, or maybe not right now, or, So how did you navigate that? And what led you to sort of finding a way to communicate this where people, it started to resonate with people?
I started to do school workshops. I did a whole pivot. I was like, because when I started my business, I had this big vision of everybody eats, everybody creates food waste, everybody needs this. I was like, worms in every house, worms in every classroom, not just one in a school as a project. Every business, every community center, wherever there's a blue bin, a recycling bin, there's a worm bin. You're eating your apple. Oh, where's the worm bin? Boom, in it goes. Because it's so valuable. That's what I thought. I thought this is going to be easy, and I discounted the worm part. And I too was afraid of worms. That's the whole funny part about this, David, is I was afraid of worms. If we go back a bit, when I bought my house, 93, I moved out of Toronto. I couldn't wait to start gardening and composting. And in 93, a teacher friend asked me to look after her worm bin. For the summer, she was going away, and I was like, ooh, worms in the house? Ooh, but I want the black gold. And I took on the challenge. People will say, oh, ooh, gross, you won't like that. Good. Just give me a list. What else won't I like? Right? Save me some time. No, you try things, people. Test it out. So that's what I did. I took on the challenge. I had worms in my basement. Gross. I'd open it up. I was a fruit fly farmer because I would open it up, throw the food in. And and the fruit flies aren't any problem for if anyone's had fruit flies, and I know you have, everybody has, and you haven't had a worm bin, the fruit flies don't come from the worm bin. They come from the food you're adding in. That's the first piece. And fruit flies don't cause any problem for any disease for humans or pets. They just bug us because we call them bugs doing their job. So they arrive on the fruit. So they're on the fruit. There's things you can do. I didn't know right away. I was like, throwing the food in that. The worms were happy because the fruit flies are decomposers. So they were just breaking it down and everyone was happy except me. And then the end of the summer, I had to keep the worms alive. They were for my friend. At the end of the summer, I got big gloves. I got a tarp, took it outside, dumped it out, put on big gloves. And I was like, this is gross. I'm never doing this again. That's where I failed because I had the fruit flies. And I was like, nobody would continue doing that. Because there's no market for fruit flies. Like, don't be a fruit fly farmer. Right? They die in a day or two. They're hard to catch and nobody's buying them. So that was my first experience. I knew how it was. And yeah, it's so interesting. So I was like, how am I going to do this if everybody's afraid or has these preconceived notions about worms? And I started to do school workshops and thought, now I just need to wait 20 years for them to have buying power. It's the 23rd anniversary.
Oh, wow.
I made it.
So schools. So how did you approach schools? I'm curious how you got started there, or where did the idea of schools come from?
Because my friend, I guess it goes back to looking after my teacher friend's worm bin in 93. That was like, you can have worms in the school. And then through networking, somebody connected me to the whole list. I'm close to Toronto, the largest city in Canada. They have a pretty large school board. And then we have the French. So we have 2 school boards, in fact. Tons of schools. I don't know, hundreds. And I got the whole list. And this was when we were using fax machines still. So I would fax my marketing campaign to the schools. Hey, you can do a worm workshop, and it's hands-on, it's interactive, it connects directly to the curriculum, all subjects. I had a math teacher say, I'm a math teacher. I'm like, math? There's 800 to 1,000 worms in a pound. They eat half their weight per day. They reduce the volume by 80%. They have 5 hearts each. What else would you like to know? It's all math. Or, an English teacher. Oh, good. They can write stories about their experience. It fits every subject and it's just beautiful. So that's how it started. And I'm animated. I'm interactive. When you're speaking, like when I speak to everyone, whoever you speak to, they want you to be engaging. Kids need super high energy, which I am without those energy drinks. And then they get to be hands-on. So when I go into the schools, if they're getting a worm bin, and I really hope they do, otherwise it's just entertainment, right? You come in, you leave, they learn some stuff, but then they forget as soon as you go. If it's in the worm bin, and the best is when they start at the beginning of the school year, because then they get the whole year, maybe they get 2 set up to harvest. And so for those listening that are going, what the heck is happening? It's a bin the size of about a Rubbermaid toad or something that size. It's carbon and nitrogen. The carbon is your foods, as your newspaper, cardboard, drink trays, straw, that kind of material. And the nitrogen is your food scraps, your peels, banana peels, coffee grounds, tea bags, cooked pasta and rice, etc. You add both of those in. It's a certain special worm that you need. Red wigglers are the best. Could be European night crawlers. In North America, those are the 2 best for composting. And they're easily accessible in the hotter states, especially Texas, California, Georgia, Florida. And yeah, the worms, again, they eat half their weight. So for easy math, if you have a pound of worms, half a pound of food scraps per day, 3 to 4 pounds per week, you're adding the scraps, the worm and the paper and the food. The worms are eating both, and their poop is the black gold. You kind of feed them and leave them, but you bury the scraps so you don't get fruit flies. You don't want a fruit fly explosion in a school. So management is required. Rinsing your scraps, letting the scraps decompose first, and then adding it in. It's a wonderful, not just science, but it really is a wonderful science project. The children can see that, like they add their banana peel in, and then, a month or 2 months later, wow, it's disappeared. It's turned into soil that then they do grow a plant for Mother's Day, Father's Day, birthdays. So, there's so many opportunities.
I love that story. So you go into schools, you teach workshops. Hopefully they're using a bin as well. And so just getting started, you're going off and teaching these, hoping for the best. And when was this moment where you felt like, oh, this is working? Or what would happen after the workshop that would, give you a sign that there might be a business here?
Well, I got paid for the workshops. And that's kind of interesting too. Things happen in your entrepreneur life. You meet somebody and they say something. In my very first year as an entrepreneur, I'm selling my bins. I get an email from a woman. She lives in a co-op in Toronto, and she was hosting somebody to come in and speak about their front yard garden. What is it? Food, not lawns or whatever it is. So to grow food instead of grass, or you could grow the different kind of grass, but anyway. And she said, I wonder if you want it to come down. She wanted to order a worm bin. And so she was ordering a worm bin. She was ordering a worm bin. Then she said, hey, I have a speaker coming in. When you bring the worm bin, how would you like to do a talk on the worms? I bet the other condo dwellers would be interested. So I said, oh, I would love that. So I get down there. When I got down there, she said, I was disappointed that you didn't say you charged for speaking. And I said,
interesting.
Right, isn't it? I said, oh, well, you were buying a worm bin. I thought that was payment enough. Huh. Ooh, how small, right? Whoops. And she said, the more you get paid, the more you're worth. And I thought in my mind, pshaw, this is so important. People need this. Anyway, it's so interesting. Okay, so that was at the beginning of my business. That same year, the very first year of my business, that was such a huge gift, David. It was so big. That year in April, so I do worms it's very environmental, my business. April for Earth Day that year, a brownie group in my town invited me to come and do a short talk for the girls. I didn't charge. I'm like, it's in my town. It's Earth Day. No, I don't need to charge. This is so great. Who am I? What the heck? What am I going to eat, the worm poo? Now, looking back, it's like, wow, missed opportunity, but it's okay. It's all learning, test it, trial and error. I thought I would get business from that because I'm coming to educate, and then they're going to be like, oh my gosh, everybody needs this. That's what I thought. Okay, so I go to this, it's down in the church basement. I don't travel light. I schlep all my stuff down. I have all these props. Okay, so I start doing my thing. Nobody helped me, by the way. Okay, I schlepped down by myself. So I start doing my gig, and some of the girls were talking, and nobody was shushing them. So I had to be the heavy. Not only am I the speaker, now I'm the heavy too. I'm like, hey, excuse me, I'm talking here. Okay, they stopped talking. I'm not even finished my talk, and one of the guides takes the broom and starts sweeping up because it's coming time to go. I'm like, oh, how rude! I'm not even finished. Wow. Okay, I finished my talk. The parents come down to get their children. They go up. I schlep all my stuff up by myself. That woman's words were echoing in my head. What you get paid is what you're worth. And I was like, oh, I'm worse than garbage. I'm speaking in the basement. I was like, bing. Okay, that's it. I'm charging more for my talks at schools. I doubled my rate for speaking at schools, and my bookings doubled or tripled. I got more bookings. It's perceived value. I know you know this.
We often talk, well, they're like illity words, right? So we talk desirability, which is sort of what's the desire there? What's the risk around people having a job to be done or an unmet need or something that they want what, you're actually offering. And then we talk about viability, which is a lot of what you're talking about, which is what are the financial risks around here? Like how much does this cost for me to do? And then what are the willingness to pay and how much people will pay. And then we talk feasibility, which is more of like, can I do this? And so for you, it feels as if you're figuring out the feasibility. So you're figuring out like how to put the fruit down at the bottom so the fruit flies don't get out, how to keep them at a certain temperature, how to manage them and all that, which is kind of a niche skill, which I imagine not a lot of people know how to do. And then the desirability of the output was certainly there. Now there were some sort of barriers with the worms, people didn't. Not everyone was on board with the worms, but they're on board with the output of the worms. And then viability is, can I actually keep this going? Is this something that's actually going to keep going? Because it could be something you enjoy doing, but it's more like a hobby than necessarily business. And I want to be very, very careful about how I say that because not every hobby should be a business. I think we're in this crazy hustle culture now where everyone thinks they have to monetize all their hobbies. I don't think that's the case. But in your case, this is something you saw for a business opportunity, and being paid for what you're worth is you're directly you hit the point. It's basically this perceived value. And not everyone has the knowledge you have because they haven't been going through all the experiences you have. So you go through and you're trying this out in different places. You get to schools, they're paying for your workshops, and you're doubling and tripling your rate sometimes and still getting more work. And so tell me a little bit about like your business model. You don't have to name prices or anything, but I sell these containers, I sell accessories around the containers, I sell my knowledge. Tell me like how you evolve that over time a bit.
I was a juggler. I had a whole whack of offerings. I would sell worms by the pound for the do-it-yourselfers, complete kits. And then I was approached by actually my first year again, somebody contacted me to order 50 pounds of worms, 50 pounds. And I did a happy dance that day. I was like, oh my gosh, I have a business. This is so great. And I didn't know how to ship 50 pounds of worms. So I drove them 3 hours one way. Right? So much for the profit. It's all right. Again, a big learning, right? So I drive them there, and he was a plastic manufacturer. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And it didn't occur to me anything else. A couple months later, he gets in touch with me and said, I have this layered tower worm composter. Do you want to try it out and potentially carry it? So a lot of things seemed to be happenstance for me. I wasn't necessarily searching for things, but I was open to opportunities. And so I said, oh, yes, of course. And so it's called the Worm Chalet. It's a beautiful system. It's out of production now, but it's a beautiful system. And the town was in London, and we were exporting to Michigan. And so London is en route from Toronto to Michigan. London's there. So I took up speaking. That's kind of my model. You asked. I have no fear of public speaking. People do. And I didn't. So I was like, people need to know. They don't know about this. So I'm the one that's going to be the knowledge bringer for this. And I got speaking opportunities at conferences because I would apply. And then hort societies. And then companies are hiring me to consult on how to manage their organic waste at the office. So they're saving money on waste management. It really, I had no interest in managing people. That's why it's my husband and I think it's amazing. So when I speak, I would talk about this gentleman and the Worm Chalet and say, what a visionary. He knew that Toronto's garbage, one day the landfill would fill up and we would be shipping the garbage. That's what I had in my story. Again, we only know what we know. We only have the story in our head. That's what I thought. I didn't know this man. And so one day, he's an engineer. So one day he called me up because engineers love problems. And he said, I'm going to be in your town. I'd love to come and talk about the chalet. So I said, oh yeah, come on. And so I was telling him, oh, Mark, oh my gosh, when I speak a lot and I tell them, wow, this visionary in London saw that Toronto's garbage would be sailing past their door and he had a solution. And he created this Worm Chalet and wow, so beautiful. And he started laughing and he said, I love that story. He said, somebody gave it to me and said, hey, this is broken. Can you fix it? But then he was manufacturing them. So then he manufactured, and then he created another system, which is like a stool. It's kind of IKEA-esque, that it's the same idea, but it's more compact. So for a New York, like a little apartment, a studio place, residents at universities, it fits anywhere, and it's an actual stool, like it's something you can use as a functional piece of furniture. So I think my journey has been multifaceted. The very first event that I exhibited at, there was a gentleman selling a sprouter, and I knew nothing about growing sprouts. So I also have a sprouting branch, but it took 10 years for me to start selling it. I used it. I was a user of the sprout system for 10 years, and I ate sprouts, and I'd been eating sprouts for 23 years. Very interesting. And in 2012, it's like my life goes in 10-year chunks where I learn something new. I'm like, maybe I'm a slow learner or something. I don't know. Anyways, in 2012, we were at Tony, this man. So he's 90, is he 96 this year? He was 72 when I met him. And I came from an employee background. I didn't know anyone that worked at 72. There's this man, he was a professional ballroom dancer.
Oh, wow.
Right? So he had his crisp white shirt, his black vest, and he was a gentleman, doling out sprouts. which are just germinated seeds for eating. And I was like, what is that? And it's like a little spaceship. It's a food grade plastic thing, stainless steel mesh. And you just grow your sprouts in there. It's hydroponic. And anyway, so I was like, what is this? And he said, it's a sprouter, told me all about sprouts. And I was like, okay, I don't need to know why something works. I'm like, oh, look at you. It's super healthy. I want what you have. So he said, okay, well, start sprouting. And so sprouts are like superfoods, hydrating, alkalizing, regenerative, biogenic, and pennies, right? We have this food crisis now. Food's expensive and all the things. Buy seeds, organic, hopefully, because why add the chemicals? Grow your own and boom. Rather than buying sprouts sprouted, which are, more costly, they're already going bad. As soon as you buy them, they're already going funky. So anyway, so I've been sprouting all this time. And in 2012, Tony and I were at an event. Now he's 82. What? And he said, hey, why don't you sell this sprouter? Because every time people were at his booth, I'd say, oh my gosh, you should buy one of those sprouters. It's so great, da-da-da. People probably thought I was a plant. Haha, sprouts. And I was like, oh my gosh, why don't I? That's a great idea. So I'm an accidental entrepreneur, just adding things that fit. And what I have in my business is what I do in my life. So I think that's one of the keys to a successful kind of business or life is doing what you love. Then you love what you're doing. And it's not like work, it's like play, and it's a beautiful life.
Yeah, I've ran into other worm startups recently. I don't know, maybe it's just coincidence, but I go to a bunch of different trade shows and, I'm often keynoting at different places. And they had it was worms for water filtration. And but farm use only. It wasn't necessarily, it was more like gray water, I think. But, I do see people looking for, especially the agricultural industry and ag tech, there's all kinds of really interesting things happening in that space right now that I think is getting overlooked because we look at least in the States, we look at all the tech, like the software tech and all the stuff coming out of Silicon Valley, which I'm guilty of because I do work in Silicon Valley. But the central part of the country, more rural areas are innovating in ways that are really interesting to me. And I do think we overlook that at times. So I'm really glad that you're sharing your story here. When I think about the future, and I think about, okay, so you've been doing this for quite some time. You sort of, it's trial and error to find out what worked. And you say a lot of it's coincidence or it's just I happen to stumble into this, but you do have the recognition to see how it might, there is some pattern matching, I think, here going on a bit with you. What are the big assumptions you think are in your business now, or maybe looking forward? What are some things you're really interested in testing, or some things you're looking at really researching and finding out?
Well, I know we've been talking all about worms, but I'm kind of transitioning now out of worms and into laughter wellness. Just because of the shutdown in 2020, people are really struggling. And in 2020, I took a deep dive. I'm a laughter yoga teacher, and I took a deep dive into the expression, laughter is the best medicine. And so I'm really launching into that. So for me, and I do intend on still educating about the worms. That is still going to be a piece, and helping younger entrepreneurs. So if anybody's listening, looking to learn more about vermicomposting and how to add it with these technologies, aquaponics, and because I do have all this knowledge, and it would be a shame for it just to go away. And so I'm so really grateful for the opportunity to talk about worms on your podcast, David. And yeah, I think it's really important. People have asked me for 23 years, can this be scaled up? And I say probably can. My goal, my focus is the individual. You have worms and you have worms and you. Maybe not the best business model, but for the planet. And that's, I believe, what my purpose is just here to let people know, hey, this is something you can do. And I have an expression, without awareness, action is impossible. And it's anything that you're doing that if people aren't doing it, if it's a really cool thing and a really great thing that's needed for the planet, if they're not doing it, they probably don't know about it. Without awareness, action is impossible. Bad for business, everyone.
Well, I think we had this fascination of scaling all the things, and I don't know what drives it. It's probably late stage capitalism. But it's this idea of, oh, will it scale? It's such a loaded question in the sense of, no, not everything has to scale. If you're having meaningful impact and you're enjoying it and you're making enough to get by, like, I think the investor culture in a way has warped how we view that work, in that, oh, it has to be something that's scalable through technology and all that. And if you say, well, I have a quote unquote lifestyle business, sometimes it's looked down upon or frowned upon by investors. And I don't think it should be. I mean, not everything needs VC funding. Not everything needs to scale. And I do think, similar to my comment earlier, not every hobby has to be monetized, right? So I do think there are places in the world for businesses like what you have, and they're having an impact, and not necessarily scaling. Scaling is not always the goal.
Well, over 100,000 students have seen my presentation. I've had a massive impact. I've spoken on many conferences, and I've met students that I was in their grade 3 class because I've been around for decades. And they meet me at trade shows or farmers markets, and they'll come up because I always have my company shirt on, same one from 20 years ago. And they say, Cathy, well, you came into my grade 3 class, and because we had worms in the class, I went to college for environmental studies, and now I'm an environmental lawyer. Right? So the impact is bigger than us. We don't know the impact that we're having.
That's a great point. You mentioned earlier, it's like sort of like the long game, right? You've been at this so long that you've impacted them so young, and they've grown up, and it's changed sort of their behaviors and how they look at things and how they perceive worms. I think that's pretty amazing. If people want to reach out to you, let's say they're listening to this episode and they're like, oh, I have questions for Cathy, or I'd love to bring Cathy in to speak, or just ask her more questions, what would be the best way for them to contact you?
I would say I guess if they want to know about worms, it's Cathy'sComposters.com, Cathy with a C. And if they do want to know about health and wellness and the laughter part, which is so fun, is Cathy'sClub.com.
Awesome. So maybe we'll have to have you back on to talk about the laughter part at some point.
Oh, I would love that.
I want to thank you so much for hanging out with me. I learned so much about worms. I think I learned what we did wrong too, maybe. I'll talk to my wife about that one. But I just appreciate you spending time and being so open and honest about like all the things that you tried over the years and what worked and what didn't, because it's not necessarily a straight line to success. So thank you so much, Cathy, for joining us today.
Thank you, David.
Thank you for listening to another episode of How I Tested That, where we share stories about experimentation, tips, and tricks. If you learned something new, please recommend us to a friend or colleague. And remember, keep testing your ideas.